Sensual desire, Kāmachanda in Pali. Kāmachanda, often translated as sensual desire, is a mental state characterized by strong craving and attachment to sensory pleasures. This hindrance perpetuates our never-ending pursuit for excitement and pleasure and self-gratification. They say in the suttas, it is seeking delight and lust. The Buddha explained that compared with anger or ill will, desire is a lesser stain on the personality, but is very hard to get rid of. The effects of Kāmachanda are a combination of excitement that is felt during the pursuit and indulgence of any pleasure, along with the sense of lack and dissatisfaction that is created as soon as we feel that desire arise. Aside from the effects of karma, intense thirst and lack is the primary emotion, the emotional suffering that we experience as soon as a desire arises. The opposite emotional state of desire is satisfaction and wholeness. The analogy the Buddha used was had involved a large pond with different dyes or oils floating on the surface of the water and discoloring the water with various colors. The water and its reflections has a pleasing appearance that is, however, not natural to the water and also preventing one from seeing through it. So in this analogy, like artificial coloring in water, desire is illusory. Everything that seems beautiful on the surface has the potential to strengthen a person's desire and attachment and create addiction. The Buddha explained to not give the sign of the beautiful to things out of fascination. In this context, the sign or nimitta means label. So when we see something as beautiful and carry a preference toward it, our state of mind is magnetized. So we become excited and attached and sometimes impose the idea that something is better than it actually is. And that's when we give the sign of the beautiful. This is a wrong view that arises from desire. So as students of spirituality, we should work towards reclaiming the sense of freedom that comes from overcoming desire and having a mind that is content without external things. How often does it occur to people that we can feel better and lighter and satisfied with less? So desire is a hindrance. We don't need desire to maintain our everyday needs. We don't need a polarized mental state of intense desire or fear just to buy toilet paper and food. The next hindrance is ill will, or Byāpāda. Ill will or harmful intention is known as Byāpāda in Pali. Byāpāda is generally considered the mental state of anger and hatred. But other states like dislike, aversion, and depression can apply depending on the context. Like all samsaric emotions, ill will can manifest in various degrees, from mild annoyance or irritation to a blind rage and hatred, which causes violence. Anger has two primary causes. It tends to come from either frustrated desire or hurt pride. And sometimes, as I mentioned in my anger talk, that frustrated desire is simply the urge for somebody to stop being annoying in one way or another. This hindrance is destructive and causes a lot of turbulence. Intrinsically, anger is just a destructive force. nothing creative comes out of it. If you analyze, observe yourself when you're angry, or other people, you realize that the thoughts and the actions simply become more aggressive and less constructive and helpful and more destructive. This hindrance, so as I said, it's turbulent and both mentally and physically or energetically. I've mentioned a few times in previous lectures about how anger disrupts the etheric body and physical nervous system, how it causes our brain and body to shut down, reducing our rational thinking ability, our civilized kind of traits and bodily functions like rest and digest system, the parasympathetic nervous system for resting and digesting, which also regulates hand and feet blood circulation. Anger also disturbs the vital connection between the brain and the suprasensible mind. The Buddha considered anger to be a great stain upon the personality. As Samuel Onbaor explained, you can't meditate when you're angry, and you can't gain insights when you're angry. You close off the connection. It disturbs the vital system. Anger and anxiety disturbs the vital body, which is the system that allows intuition to flow through because it's the fuel for your insights. Anger dramatically distorts perception and judgment. So it perpetuates delusion. The mind unwisely entertains the anger that arises from frustrated desires and hurt pride. On top of this, it is also very contagious. So one person's anger has the potential to spread or negatively affect whoever else is around them. We notice the anger affecting our judgment when we say things like, I'm sorry, that I didn't mean that was the anger talking. We can have these very ruthless, extreme thoughts and think in that moment, because the anger is acting as a filter, it seems right for us and it seems okay to say a certain thing or to be ruthless about something. And then, of course, when the anger is gone, we regret it because now that filter is no longer engaged when the anger dissipates, and all of a sudden we see more clearly. And of course, all the samskaras are like this. They're just filters in front of our perception or consciousness. However, having said that, he also said, the Buddha said, that it is, so in spite of the great stain that anger is, it is relatively easy to get rid of because of how painful it is to live with. So the Buddha used a couple similes to describe anger. In one text, he says that, and I quote, "The mind in its natural state is like clear, still water that one can see through without distortion. Anger is like boiling water. When the bubbles appear, you can no longer see the bottom of the pot or your own reflection." In another text, he explains that anger is like being ill. It is an unnatural state of consciousness that simply feels unpleasant. And even though there are people who think that anger can feel good, like when they use it to motivate themselves to push through a challenging situation, the only reason why that anger feels good is because of the expectation that things will get better, that they will get what they want once and for all. And when that revenge or frustrated desire is still not met, of course the anger persists. It's not only is anger destructive to the vital and nervous system, but it distorts perception and feeds delusion. So when we're angry, we often turn to various forms of expression like shouting or exercise or striking a pillow or a punching bag. And this is fine for short term. This is a short-term, simple transmutation of energy. But in the long run, it only satisfies the anger temporarily. Same with revenge. It can really satisfy the anger, but it's just a temporary, cheap kind of rewarding sensation. And then later on, it comes back, of course. Sometimes it comes back because our situation hasn't changed, but always does it come back because we haven't learned anything from it. So it can only get worse over time. If you keep feeding your anger or taking revenge or retaliating, that's only going to get worse over time. It can, small expressions of anger can help once in a while, but it cannot be a habit because it'll just spiral down and get worse. That's why we have to pace ourselves. I mean, to not show any anger from here on, to make that commitment to never express anger might be too much to chew, that you may be biting off too much to chew. It's too hard all at once. So we have to take our own steps and pace ourselves. The samskaras of ill will remain when we entertain anger, and then the karma that those samskaras contain simply bring back more challenging experiences that continue to provoke us, both in this life, and if it's more serious, it will just, what we do in this life will continue on in the next life. Or from the previous lives, if it's not exhausted, then it will continue again, still in the next life, in future lives. And as for renouncing and eliminating anger, this requires a lot of mindfulness because our society has reached a point at which it's become extremely common and normal to carry a level of ongoing anxiety or depression or anger. So many people are so accustomed to this that they don't fully recognize it in themselves, right? They've trained themselves undeliberately to just not recognize certain things like anxiety or annoyance. So it would be useful then to find yourself in a situation where you're not so anxious or agitated with anger, so that you can really notice how much better you feel when you're at peace. And it's going to take extra effort to really catch yourself each time it happens again, because we've made it a habit all our lives. For the majority of students, eliminating anger is a gradual process of renouncing selfishness and preferences and cultivating compassion and loving kindness, known as metta. It is fundamental that the renunciation of pride and anger is enforced by the understanding of anatta, which is the insubstantial and empty nature of the self. This truth is what allows us to realize that things like insults and criticism are irrelevant, because we don't ultimately exist as individuals. There aren't a lot of comprehensions that a person has to go through in order to conquer anger. It's a hindrance that simply needs to be extinguished by starving it over time. It takes persistence. Sloth and torpor. These are very old-fashioned terms to describe what we may now call this as laziness and lethargy, or sluggishness, or dullness. In Pali, it's Thīna-middha. So classically, it was known as sloth and torpor, the English translations. It was probably an Oxfordian English translation. Tina refers to mental dullness and laziness, whereas middha refers to physical fatigue and drowsiness and physical laziness. These related hindrances are the result of a lack of energy, both physical and subtle. They impede attention and mental clarity during meditation and daily activities. I've also spoken a fair deal about energy management in most of my presentations on sexual energy and the inner Tathagata Garbha known as Tara. The Buddha's simile for dullness and laziness involves a pond that has been kept so still and stagnant that vegetation and algae has completely grown over the surface, covering all possible reflections of the water and making it impossible to see through. So I suppose what he was trying to convey is the heaviness of the pond because of all the algae and water lilies and things, as well as just finding ourselves clouded and very stuck in our ways of laziness and lazy ways of doing things. Because when we wake up in the morning as well, we can often feel a great heaviness due to the time we spent in such a deep state of sleep and physical stagnation. And in today's fast-paced modern era, many of us struggle to find that normal equilibrium between fatigue and restlessness or anxiety. The two states are related opposites. Nowadays, chronic fatigue and sleepiness can develop from a number of causes. The primary ones being lack of sleep, eating large meals, and also adrenal fatigue these days because people are drinking so much coffee. It's so popular to drink coffee, and it's also popular to get very stressed every day on a daily basis, which can cause that. So having uncertainty in your life's purpose, being stressed out, and more complicated but common conditions like adrenal fatigue, as well as type 2 diabetes. Getting into adrenal fatigue, this is the result of overexertion on the nervous system and adrenal glands because of prolonged stress. You might be surprised that for most people, much of that stress does indeed come from too much caffeine, which, as I mentioned, it's adrenal fatigue. So it stimulates your cortisol and adrenaline. Other people experience, rather struggle with chronic nervous system damage that occurred in the past because they went through a long phase of stress that lasted something like a few months, maybe even years, whether it was from bullying at school or being in a narcissistic relationship with someone. So they may too have adrenal fatigue or nervous system issues, including like chronic indigestion, bloating, and like heartburn, as we call it. And so when you have this adrenal fatigue, you tend to be, they say it's wired and tired. So sometimes you can be easily stressed. You can be nervous and anxious all the time very easily. And then that's followed by a crash. And so you can also fall asleep very easily, and you can be tired all the time. So your energy levels are irregular. So caffeine stimulates the stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, and it also affects our response to insulin. But without getting too technical, I'm explaining this because it's important, this health aspect of sloth and torpor. And it's a digression, but it's important. So it's best to limit your caffeine intake to 150 to 200 milligrams per day, which is really like maximum you should be having. The body is not as resilient as some of us might think it is. Caffeine's extremely strong. So that's between 1 and 2 cups of coffee per day. And by cups of coffee, I mean 250 milliliters. So those large 7-Eleven or Tim Hortons cups of coffee are like double that in terms of size. That's too much. Reducing caffeine like this should eventually allow your stress system to recover after about 6 months to a year on average. The reason why I don't advocate that you stop drinking coffee altogether is because for those of us who are really struggling with fatigue, we still need that boost of caffeine just to get us through the afternoon. Otherwise, we will fall asleep. We will not stay awake. But alternatives like tea, even store-bought carton tea, can serve as a good and milder supplement, because tea has, per cup, tea has a little bit less than half the amount of caffeine that a cup of coffee does, or even like 1/3 the amount. Now, for general fatigue and laziness, there are a number of other things a person can do for this. And the Buddha instructed to, he suggested numerous things like looking up at the sky or a bright light, or to splash cold water on your face. He also suggested to go outside and perform walking meditations as an alternative to sitting meditation. This included walking barefoot in the snow. And he spoke of mental contemplations for laziness and lack of will. The primary contemplation being the fact that time and life are passing by and will inevitably come to an end. So this is something to become aware of as soon as possible and take action against. First, there is the motivation to invest in your well-being and happiness in life. And then there is the awareness of death, which can come at any time, really. After all, the opposite of death is life. So the element that sloth and torpor lacks is life energy. Therefore, contemplate the reality of death and bring it into close awareness. Recognize that every second that ticks away on the clock is a step closer to death. If you can deepen this contemplation enough through concentration and drowsiness, you can potentially undergo a preparatory near-death experience in the internal worlds. These meditations on death are not intended to be morbid. They are just meant to instill the sense of being alive and comprehending the value of life, the preciousness of life. And meditation is a lifelong pursuit. Helping others through dharmic service is the highest purpose in life. Therefore, as students of spirituality, we have no reason to be lazy or lack willpower. So gaze at the sky, let the light captivate your attention, and infuse some oxygen into your stagnant recesses of your mind. The stagnation permeating your entire life can be problematic. Our day job or marriage can sometimes become like a still pond with settled mud on the bottom and accumulated slime on the surface. They lack expansiveness. So we can counter this boredom and stagnation by always looking to expand the different aspects of our lives. And one way to start this is by cultivating mudita, or sympathetic joy. In this practice, we absorb the energy and success and happiness of others by engaging with people who have invigorating lives, kind of living vicariously. So seek out good company, people who radiate vitality, spend time with energetic and joyful people. It has a remarkably contagious effect. And if connecting with lively, positive people is challenging, even listening to podcasts or watching Dhamma talks can help, or listening to beautiful music, as long as it's, good music, healthy music. The best music to It's human nature to associate with others who possess a strong, focused energy. Recognize that living with lethargy is not something you should simply live with. Actively infuse your life with energy. It is a mandatory factor for awakening, both in the kind of superficial sense where you gain energy in your attitude, but of course in the more profound, mandatory, crucial sense where you conserve your sexual energy through transmutation and the renunciation of perverse sexual acts, inferior sexuality, and the orgasm. Restlessness and agitation. Uddhacca-Kukkucca. The nature of the hindrance. Uddhacca is mental restlessness or agitation, whilst Kukkucca is a form of restlessness from anxiety or guilt. These mental disturbances completely hinder concentration and clarity and serenity. In the simile the Buddha used, the surface of a bowl of water is agitated by wind, making it impossible to see one's own reflection without distortion. Any kind of excess energy can compel the mind to become overactive. It can range from excitement and ideas to an uncomfortable sense of restlessness and mental disorganization, in which one is very distracted and unsure of which task to perform next. This tends to happen when we have to cater to a group of people or multitask. Now, these water similes that the Buddha used are all meant to reveal the truth, or rather the true nature of the self. Water is used as a symbol for the mind, and the reflections on the surface of the water, or lack thereof, represent our perception. And so, as on top of this, though, they have the potential, these similes have the potential to also reveal the three fundamental qualities of existence, which are anicca, which is impermanence, anatta, meaning insubstantiality, and the absence of individual selfhood in all things, and dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature of existence. But this truth can only be seen when the water settles down after the wind has passed. This is when the mind becomes still and clear. Restlessness is a hindrance that requires very rigorous self-observation or mindfulness. Because when we're restless, we tend to have thoughts and distractions coming and going like busy traffic. So before implementing the remedies for Uddhacca-Kukkucca, we need to make sure that our mindfulness is very strong and consistent. And to remedy this, most of us try to settle our minds down by cleaning the house or organizing and prioritizing all the tasks we have to do, and then completing them one at a time. It is also effective to use up excess energy and restlessness by providing service to others and exercising. Whatever you do, it's best to use up energy doing something creative or constructive. However, there are occasions when we simply have to learn to live with the disorder in our life, like when we have children or pets who are noisy or needy and make a mess all the time. For those circumstances, our ability to tolerate will eliminate a certain degree of ego. Just the tolerating itself is a certain, to have tolerance in itself is a degree of comprehension. So egos will die when events are stressful enough. Egos will die over time and diminish. Not all of them, but that's the first level, is restraint. Restraining egos allows them to become weaker, and then they can die. Then the next solution is serenity and concentration meditation, since these are meant to still the mind and lead one into equanimity in the form of dhyana or samadhi. And this is how we train ourselves to be calm and peaceful all the time and eventually live in these places psychologically, living in these states of concentration, living in the jhanas, living in nirvana, living in samadhi. That's of course down the road. It typically takes, months, years of training. But meditation is a very good use of energy, because when we meditate, we're transmuting our energy and using it to strengthen concentration and gain wisdom. And in the meantime, because we're trying to eliminate ego, we need comprehension, and we gain comprehension, a lot of it from meditation, particularly Vipassana meditation, right? Insight meditation, which is different than mindfulness. So this is where you are analyzing a specific challenge in order to learn from it. So every hindrance needs to be meditated on so we can learn something about it, learn what to do about our situation. And that comprehension itself is deeper than just the self-restraint, and that will eliminate more ego as we do it. Because comprehension is what allows the ego to die. It can also be very helpful to surround yourself with grounded people who seem to carry the calmness that you're looking for. And similarly, listening to a Dhamma lecture or a guided meditation can significantly ground and refocus the mind. Lastly, there are many natural supplements that can be bought at health food stores that significantly help in maintaining calmness in the nervous system especially, which consequently affects our mind anyway. Many people with ongoing stress are depleted of minerals like potassium and magnesium. And most people are deficient in magnesium, so this is a good idea. Drinking 1 or 2 cups of coconut water can provide noticeable calmness within minutes through the intake of potassium, because just 1 or 2 cups will give you that range between 450 and 900 milligrams of potassium. And supplementing with between 100 and 400 milligrams of high quality magnesium. I prefer bisglycinate, but also I've had some good success with malate, magnesium malate as well. Tends to have the same immediate sedative effect, along with much better digestion. So it can de-bloat you, gets rid of acid reflux, along with much this better blood circulation around the hands and feet, reduced muscle cramps. And also restless leg syndrome. And magnesium just has so many functions for the nervous system. It's so good in that way. It gives you noticeable effects. Now the range daily dose, I believe it's 300 for women and 400 milligrams for men, or maybe it's 250 for women, 350 milligrams for men per day. You can take it all at once, or you can take it in smaller doses when you need them. Or you could take like 100 or 130 milligrams when you're feeling a bit anxious, or after you've eaten, when you have a bit of bloating. Now the next hindrance is doubt, Vicikicchā. Doubt, skepticism, and uncertainty in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, as well as one's own spiritual experiences and abilities, is known as Vicikicchā. It arises from a lack of experience or success in Dhamma practices. Doubt can also return easily when we forget parts of the teaching or stop carrying through our dharmic routine. When we forget our habits. In the simile, there is a pool or puddle of muddy water in a dark place in which the reflections of the water are difficult to see. These symbolize two problems, one being that the muddy water is like a clouded mind that is unable to reveal the nature of existence, and two being that the dim reflections from the water prevent you from practicing effective self-reflection. All people who come to the teaching need a level of faith to get started because of how secular and, in this day and age, intellectual we've become as a society. And because in any age, because newcomers still haven't quite found absolute experiential or scientific proof of the legitimacy of the Dhamma or other esoteric practices. So doubt is often accompanied with anxiety. One of the first things a person can do when they're in doubt is practicing serenity meditation. The mud in the water is like a restless mind that is disorganized and confused by information. The mud needs to settle down to the bottom so that the water becomes clear again. The aim of this practice is to dissolve rather than solve. To dissolve the sense of agitation and disorganization that comes from all the labeling and problem solving of intellectual thoughts. This is important because skepticism can lead to endless intellectualism, and yet it tends to be the case that our problems are not as complicated as we made them up to be. There are also something in the Sangha called knowing the waterhole. This simile came from the idea that a resourceful villager knows where all the nearby drinking water holes are. It means that students should establish and maintain connections with nearby teachers, gurus, and masters in their community or Sangha. We don't use water holes anymore, so these are our resources. That way, the students can turn to them whenever they find themselves uncertain about certain aspects of the teaching. So Dhamma or Dharma is a solitary work. In spite of that, in spite of the mentorship. As such, the most effective way to prove the validity of the teaching is by testing your own experiences. Whenever doubt begins to grow in our mind, we must investigate very keenly in meditation. This is Dhamma Vicaya, this practice of investigation. We need to practice this enough times until we've developed the ability to recognize intuitive insights and notice how certain physical events synchronize or resonate or answer to these insights that we get, typically in our dreams. And sometimes when we're awake, these physical synchronicities. So that we can see that some of these insights are impossibly coincidental, or it's coincidental. At the same time, this will develop our ability to differentiate between divine intuitions and simply mechanical thoughts, fantasies, that are just repeating themselves because of our egoic mind. So those are the 5 hindrances. That is my summary. Thank you for watching. Sabbe sata sukhi hontu.